All right, so we're going to dive deep into the world of Biggie Smalls today, and I'm excited. I mean, he went from those Brooklyn streets to becoming a hip-hop legend, really, and a poet, too, right?
His storytelling, man, it really did change everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Biggie's story, it goes way beyond just the music itself, the beats and rhymes. He was giving us a picture, like a really vivid picture of life in Brooklyn.
But it wasn't all like glamorous, right? I mean, he had his mom working hard to make ends meet, but then there's this whole of the street life too.
Exactly, and that's the thing, that tension, right? That back and forth, wanting a better life, but also the pull of the streets, that's like at the core of Biggie's music. It's fueling his stories. Those narratives, they're complex. It's a push and pull that a lot of people can relate to. It's real, yeah. And then there's this kid just rhyming on street corners, basically turning his life, his everyday life, into these rhymes. It's like the streets themselves were like his inspiration, like his muse almost, right? So what do you think it was about those experiences, those early years, that just made his storytelling so powerful, so different?
Well, it's the authenticity, right? I mean, Biggie's stories, they hit you because they were real. When he's rapping about hustling, about being broke, about wanting something more, it's real because he lived that. He wasn't making it up.
Totally. It's that like, I've been there, I've done that. It just makes you believe every word. Okay, so we've got this raw talent, and then there's the street smarts. Like, that perspective you don't get from just reading a book. But then things change. There's this huge moment. Biggie meets Diddy.
Yeah.
John Diddy Combs.
Right.
And Diddy, he sees something. I mean, he sees that potential, signs Biggie to Bad Boy Records. Talk about a game changer.
Absolutely. This really shows you how important mentorship and support are, for any artist. Like, Diddy gave him a platform, that structure, and it helped Biggie, hone his skills, get in front of a much bigger audience.
Like liftoff, from the streets to the charts. Now, let's dig into what really made Biggie's storytelling stand out. Because, I mean, back then, a lot of rappers were talking about similar stuff, but Biggie, he had this way of pulling you in, like you were part of his world.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, let's look at Juicy. I mean, on the surface, it's about getting out of poverty, right? But he's doing so much more. He's painting this picture with metaphors and imagery. You feel that hunger, that drive, like you can almost taste success when he gets it. And when he says, it was all a dream, I used to read Word Up magazine. I mean, come on, you're right there with him, flipping through those pages, dreaming big.
Totally. It's like he's making a movie in your mind as you listen. But then we have the other side of things. Tracks like Everyday Struggle. And man, it just hits you, that rawness, the hardship, you can just feel it.
Yeah, and he's not holding back, is he? Like, he's letting you see it all, the dark side too. Everyday struggle, he lays it all out. I'm living in fear, my mama can't make ends meet. That line, it gets me every time.
Right.
I mean, it's real emotion. It connected with so many people who were going through their own tough times.
Because it's honest, right? It's not just a story, he's making you feel it. Part of that, I think, is how he delivered it. The flow over the beat, his voice, those rhyme schemes. Like he was changing the rules of rap, just rewriting them as he went.
Let's break that down a bit. Flow. In hip-hop, we're talking about how smoothly the rappers' words, their lyrics, ride the beat. It's got to be rhythmic. And Biggie, he was effortless, like smooth as a river.
Yeah.
But then there's the lyrical skill, too. That means how he was using words, how he's putting together these rhymes, these metaphors, and they all come together, building these incredible verses, complex but so vivid.
Yeah, like he took rap
Yeah.
and made it like this next level art form. It wasn't just about a catchy hook anymore. It was about these stories that stick with you long after the song's over.
And he did it in a way that, it's masterful, but it's also something you can just grab onto. It wasn't like he was trying to be all fancy. He was just being Biggie.
Exactly. It was like he was just talking to you, telling you his story, just over a beat. But Biggie's life, it wasn't all just struggles in making music. His personal life, that was a big part of his story too. Like his relationship with Faith Evans, they were huge in the 90s hip-hop scene.
It is interesting how an artist's personal life, it weaves its way into their art, that passion, the ups and downs. You can hear it in Biggie's music.
Like he was pulling inspiration from everywhere, everything he lived. And speaking of inspiration, we got to talk about this other thing that had a major impact on Biggie's career. His rivalry with Tupac Shakur.
Oh, yeah. Biggie's personal life, it gave him inspiration, but it also brought him into some of the darker sides of the industry. And that rivalry with Tupac, that was part of it. I mean, it started with respect, right? Two super talented guys, but then things got bitter.
It escalated so fast. And I think Part of it was just that tension that was building between East Coast and West Coast rap, you know. It was a bad time, a dark time in hip-hop history, for sure.
Yeah, it really was. And this rivalry, you can't tell Biggie's story without it. It shows you the pressure, what it's like to be in that world, those rivalries, and sadly, how dangerous it can be.
Yeah. It reminds you that life, it can be fragile, especially when you're in the spotlight like that. And tragically for Biggie, it ended way too soon.
Yeah, yeah. It's a loss, that we still feel today. But Biggie's story, his legacy, I mean, it didn't end with his death.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, even after he was gone, his influence just kept growing. Like that posthumous album, Life After Death, that was huge.
He was.
Tracks like Hypnotize, Money Mo Problems. I mean, they just cemented his status as a legend, right?
It's amazing to think about, an album that comes out after he's gone and it becomes one of his most iconic. That tells you something. It tells you about the power of his music, the power of those stories he told.
I think part of it is that it's an escape, right?
Yeah.
But it's grounded in reality too. Like he got it. The human condition, I guess you'd call it, those highs and lows, what we all go through.
Yeah, and that's why his stories, they last, because they tap into those things, those universal themes, like money mo problems, right? The idea that success, money doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it just gives you new problems.
Right.
I mean, it's relatable. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from.
No, it's true. And it's also that reminder that, no matter how far you get, you never really leave your past behind, do you?
No.
Biggie, he always stayed connected to those Brooklyn roots, even when he was, like, on top of the world.
And you hear it in his music. That honesty, that authenticity shines through every single verse. And he wasn't afraid to be real to show you those flaws, too, those insecurities. That's what makes him so relatable, I think.
Oh, for sure. So we've talked about the stories, how he delivered them, that vulnerability. But there's this other element that I think made Biggie so captivating.
Yeah.
His voice, man. That deep baritone voice. You knew it was him right from the start.
Absolutely. That voice, it was like its own instrument. He could pack so much emotion into it. You hear that swagger, that confidence in Hypnotize. But then you've got tracks like Suicidal Thoughts, so raw, so vulnerable.
And it wasn't all dark, introspective. Like tracks like Big Papa, that was his fun side, right?
Yeah.
The charm, the wit, that smooth delivery.
He could do it all. That's part of why people still love him, right? That versatility. He could be the kingpin, the tough guy, then turn around and be the heartbroken lover. And you believed him every time.
He had all those sides, all those different parts of what it means to be human. And he was a master at capturing that, the complexity of life, the good, the bad, the whole thing. But he did it in a way that felt real, honest, and ultimately hopeful.
Yeah, even in those darker tracks, there's something underneath, that resilience, like a belief that things can get better. That's powerful, especially if you're going through something tough yourself.
He gave a voice to those who didn't have one, to those who were struggling, fighting to overcome something. He made it cool to be smart, to be lyrical, to tell stories that mattered.
And he never pretended to be something he wasn't, What you saw, what you heard, that was Biggie.
And that's what's so amazing about his legacy. I mean, he proved that you could come from nothing, face these huge challenges, and still you can achieve greatness. But it wasn't just about being famous, about being rich, was it?
No, he was about more than that. He was about using his platform to make a difference, giving back to his community, helping other artists. I mean, how many people did he inspire to go after their dreams?
Right. And he helped close that gap, between the streets and the mainstream. Hip-hop wasn't just underground anymore. It was a force.
A force to be reckoned with, for sure.
And Biggie was leading the charge. He brought hip-hop to a wider audience, but he never lost that realness, that message. He stayed true to his roots.
He did.
And you can see his influence. I mean, so many artists that came after him, Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar, so many, they all owe something to what Biggie did. That storytelling, the way he blended social commentary with those raw emotions.
Yeah, he set a new standard for what hip-hop could be. Musically, lyrically, it could be complex. You could look inward and still be successful. It could be everything.
It's crazy to think how much he did, in such a short time. It makes you wonder, what if he'd had more time?
It's a tragedy, definitely. But the music's still here. His stories, they still inspire. And his legacy, I mean, that's untouchable.
So we've explored his journey. From those Brooklyn streets to global impact, right? Yeah. The good times, the bad times, and just that incredible artistry. That's what made him a legend. But now we want to hear from you.
Yeah. How has Biggie's music touched you? What are some of those tracks that you just keep coming back to? And I mean, why? Why do they stick with you? We've gone deep on Biggie in this deep dive, but that's the thing about his music, right? There's always something else to find, something new.
Yeah, that's what makes a true artist, you know? When their work, it keeps evolving, keeps showing you new stuff. And Biggie's music, it wasn't just about, turning up and having a good time. There's reflection there.
Oh, yeah.
Like he was forcing us to look at things,
Yeah.
poverty, violence, those systemic issues,
Yeah.
But he also gave you this like glimmer of hope, this belief that things could get better. He left us with this treasure chest, really. Music, stories that people will be talking about, debating, celebrate, forever.
For years to come, yeah.
His music shows you the power of a good story and how important it is to be real, to be authentic. It reminds you, even when things are tough, there's beauty, there's strength, and there's that chance to do something great, to be great.
It's a good reminder.
Biggie Smalls, the Notorious B.I.G., a true legend.